Hi, my name is Ann Phelim.
And I'm Phelim Scoop.
Welcome to the Ann Phelim Scoop, where today we've got a lot going on today. This is a big show, actually.
This is your special Independence Day weekend.
Yeah.
We always felt that the days, like birthday should be a weekend. St. Patrick's Day, a weekend. Right?
My birthday should be celebrated
several
for months.
Several days. It should be a festival. So we've got over the Independence Day weekend, and actually it's good this year because Friday the 3rd is kind of a holiday, and the 4th, and then it drags into the 5th, and sure, Monday is a great day as well.
So we decided to interview one of our most favourite people in the whole world, Detective Jim Wood, today, but you're going to come to that. We're going to come to that later.
Yeah, Jim's the guy who discovered America's biggest serial killer, Kermit Gosnell. We made the Gosnell movie, we wrote a book about him, but it's true to say there'd be no Gosnell movie or book or anything.
Or Gosnell would not be in prison doing three life sentences if it weren't for Jim Wood.
Without Jim Wood. So we're going to hear from Detective Wood, and we're also going to talk to him about what it's like to be a police officer in today's America. It's a great interview. It's a long interview. You won't want to miss it. Also on today's Scoop, shockingly, the leftist media world is surprised that some people think Black Lives Matter supporters might mean them harm. You know, a shocker because they haven't harmed anything in the world. And Hollywood, of course, is just going to be Hollywood, and we're going to talk about that as well. And we examine, is New York dead? It has been pronounced dead on arrival in the past, in the 70s and 80s. We look at the man responsible for its revival and ask, can that happen again?
And we bring you outside to the patio, where I'm going to be sharing a recipe for gin and tonic and sharing some advice about tonic waters. So don't miss out that at the very end.
Yes, you'll see our wonderful patio. So first of all, we're going to ask you to help us over this Independence Day. We cover unreported stories. We bring stories that no one else talks about. We're the Unreported Story Society. But this takes resources. It takes time. We fly to places like New York, when you could fly to New York, to cover the Weinstein trial, to bring the truth about the Me Too movement.
In Pennsylvania, to cover the Gosnell trial.
We went to Dakotas to cover the Keystone Pipeline protests.
We went to San Francisco to cover the Planned Parenthood trial. So we need your help. We need your help to keep going, and we have wonderful people who work with us, and we want to keep everyone on payroll. We want to keep the lights on here. So please give what you can to the unreportedstorysociety.com. unreportedstorysociety.com, and we particularly like our sustaining members who can give every month something every month.
That'd be great.
So we'd really appreciate it. So Phelim, tell us what extraordinary thing happened over the weekend?
Well, did you see those people who came out with the guns at the Black Lives Matters protest? They were in St. Louis, and the media is shocked that. So these. This
is the couple. By the way, this is the couple. You'll remember the man is wearing the pink polo shirt, and the wife is wearing horizontal stripes. By the way, not a girl's best friend normally.
Yes.
But they're very suburban looking, right? But they're outside their gorgeous house in St. Louis.
Oh, and the media thinks so. A Black Lives Matter protest arrived outside their house, and that's bad enough. But they actually broke into a gated community and broke down a gate to get in. And these people came out with guns. And
they're the bad guys, right?
And they're the bad guys. And the media is trying to demonize them. And, GQ, just for example, GQ reported, it was a big weekend for hysterical white people flipping out on protesters. You're not being, hysterical. The number of dead from Black Lives Matter protests are almost in the double figures. Now, I haven't counted them up because the media won't count them up for you. The number of properties looted and burned.
Billions of dollars of damage.
I mean, it's hundreds of this. It could be thousands, actually. There was 75 damage over in Santa Monica.
75 buildings.
Yeah, and that's not including Fairfax, where there was another few dozen burned there.
And buildings have been looted. Extremely expensive stuff that was in those stores, also in Santa Monica. And I saw some footage earlier from, I think it was from Seattle, where a Mercedes-Benz dealership had been broken into, and they just burned out these Mercedes cars.
So that's just Santa Monica, Fairfax, one city, Los Angeles, Seattle, Philadelphia, St. Louis. So we're talking, the automatic response when Black Lives Matter people burst into your gated community should be, where's my gun? I'm sorry, number of people are dead. There was a police captain a 70-year-old in his 70s murdered in a Black Lives Matter attack. This is not a joke. But the media are pretending that every Black Lives Matter protest
is a peaceful protest,
and that your reaction is an overreaction. And it's the same way they do with race hoaxes. There's a new one. There's a new race attack. Althea Bernstein claims she was burned alive. To me, it smelled a bit funny. But the media report every race attack, alleged attack, as if there's never been a race hoax, whilst it's clear that the majority of these noose attacks and the Jussie Smollett attacks, that, you know, ordinary people go, there's been all these hoaxes recently. I wonder, is this one of them? Where the media pretend there's never been a hoax and they treat it with the same breathless belief and just dig their own grave, really.
Mm-hmm.
So well done. I mean, I see the couple have issued a statement now. We support the Black Lives Matter. You know, this is what you do when you're becoming a hate figure. But, you know, they did the right thing. You know, maybe some people were peaceful in that protest. Maybe they weren't. Trust but verify.
But I think when you have broken in a gate of a gated community, you've actually already trespassed on someone else's property. It's not like this was a public thoroughfare. I think that's an incredibly important point to make. Mm-hmm. This was not a public thoroughfare where protesters were walking past. They had already broken in, illegally broken in.
Yes.
So I think the people's reaction was actually very, and I think it's horrible actually of people to be analyzing what they were wearing or whatever. They're at their home, relaxing at their home, and just because they're really wealthy, is that a crime now? Because this is America. For what I knew, it's a land of opportunity. You wouldn't know who it is that's very wealthy nowadays. Yes.
And if wealthy is a problem, maybe they should break into Oprah Winfrey's house. Or Tom Hanks.
Yeah, exactly. We know where she lives.
Yeah, talking to Colin Kaepernick. So Hollywood's going to Hollywood. I just want Colin Kaepernick and Ava DuVernay team up for a Netflix limited series about the activists' teen years.
There's a guy who has probably a very nice house, by the way. I would imagine.
And my one thing with this Hollywood is no one wanted this, no one demanded this, no one cares about it. He was a bad football player apparently who took an issue, and he's only famous for that issue.
And he's pretty much ruined that NFL because of those actions, because he politicized the NFL, which was something, a joy, like art, by the way, which should never be politicized either.
Everyone could watch
the joy of that something that brought people together, that he's kind of ruined for everyone.
And more Hollywood. So there was something like 50 or 60 movies applied for the Californian tax credit last year, and what did they give it to? They gave it to one of them. 10 of them only got it. A trans teen drama.
Moonshadow.
Yes, there you go. That's what they think is important. And then in other Hollywood news, Joe Biden raised $6 million at a Jeffrey Katzenberg virtual fundraiser, and of course, it's very funny.
Amazing. A fundraiser, and he didn't even have to go there, and he got $6 million.
Yes. That's Hollywood for you. And then it's very funny. These three stories are all in this little headline.
A little brief on the...
Yeah. Oscar-nominated director Ciro Guerra called sexual harassment and assault claims false. I thought that was funny. So you've got the trans teen drama, Joe Biden raising money, and then sexual harassment false. The guy behind the
I Love New York logo
dies.
So somebody invented the I Love logo, the I Love New York logo, which is that kind of heart, which everyone bought T-shirts, everyone bought hats and whatever. So the guy who invented it has died at the age of 91. Milton Glasser, the graphic designer. Yeah. So tell us more about him, Phelim.
He was a great guy, actually. His poster Bob Dylan is famous. He actually consulted on Mad Men as well because he obviously was around then in the heydays.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, he did that for free. He decided, you know what, I want to do this for New York.
That's fabulous.
And I think he did it in the back of a taxi when his other pitch was rejected.
What did he do in the back of the taxi?
He designed the
I Love New York.
Boom.
So he did it for free? That logo was given away for free?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
What a great man.
What a great thing to do.
Anyway, I just thought of it because New York is in serious trouble. Crime is rising. Bail has been, there's no bail now. You get arrested, you put back in the street.
A lot of wealthy people have left New York, and people who had the opportunity to leave New York and may never come back again. And a lot of people are writing obituaries to New York City and saying it's over for Manhattan.
And of course, it was over in the 70s and 80s. Then this logo came along, a newfound pride. And people are saying that the city will bounce back. After 9/11 too, people said the city did bounce back. But my question is, can you save a city if people don't agree it needs to be saved? Some people see crime as as a strike against oppression. Some people see it as okay. Here in LA, they have decriminalized crime, and any theft I can steal up to $950 every day and never be charged with a felony. It's always a misdemeanor ticket. So I can steal a bike from every house around here. I can steal,
and plenty of people are.
I can steal a laptop if it's less than $950. I can steal it every day and never be charged with a crime. And
that's why crime is such a big problem here. And we had our own little issue here in the house with that.
I'm not sure if New York can be saved, because some people don't think it needs to be saved.
Okay.
So we're going to go now to our interview with Detective Jim Wood. It's going to be one of our favorite interviews, one of our longest interviews actually, but there's so much to cover with Jim, and just to give any of you who don't know about the Gosnell case, he's the biggest serial killer in American history, but it wasn't covered by the media at the time until they were shamed into doing it. Jim is the detective it started off as a narcotics investigation, but became putting a serial killer behind bars, but a serial killer who was covered up because he was murdering women and babies in abortion clinics, which, to a certain extent has become legalized in New York and other places. And as Governor Northam of Virginia said, make the baby comfortable and
comfort care,
and have a conversation with the doctor and the mother,
after the baby's born.
Gosnell, that was the problem with the Gosnell case, that it just got too close to what was legal, and it was So this brings up all sorts of issues. Let's go to that interview. We recorded it
just a little bit
earlier. You got to listen to it. It's wonderful.
Hi everyone. Well, at a time when the cops in the United States are getting assaulted, abused, hated, and being defunded because of the actions of a few individual cops, we wanted to introduce you to one of the greatest cops we know. Detective Jim Wood is the Philadelphia police detective who is the real-life inspiration for the movie Gosnell, the trial of America's biggest serial killer, which was based on the book we wrote, Gosnell, the Untold Story of America's Biggest Serial Killer. Untold because the media largely ignored the story. Kermit Gosnell is serving 3 life sentences for murder, for delivering babies alive and then cutting their necks with scissors. Gosnell was only discovered because Detective Jim Wood, who was working as an undercover narcotics investigator for the DA's office in Philadelphia, came across a doctor in West Philadelphia who was suspected of selling Oxycontin and other prescription drugs to drug dealers.
So Woody and other detectives did an undercover sting to find out what was going on. What they discovered was probably one of the biggest cases of their lives and one of the biggest cases in the history of Philadelphia. It should have been much bigger, but what it uncovered was some uncomfortable truths about abortion and the abortion industry, and I suppose how the establishment kind of turned a blind eye to it, and one of America's biggest serial killers was allowed to operate in plain sight. So we have the pleasure to welcome Jim on here. He's the guy, as the assistant DA said in our book. He said there would be no case without Jim Wood. Gosnell killed many people. He killed Carnamina Monger, a Nepalese refugee, but her death went unnoticed until Jim started investigating, sniffing around, and as ADA Christine Wexler said, that he was her champion, he was her hero, and he got her justice. So Jim is a great cop and a great guy.
And a great friend, and it's a true honor to welcome you to the Ann Phelim Scoop. How are you, Jim?
Great, Ann. Great, Phelim. Thank you so much for the kind words. You guys do this all the time, and I really appreciate it. And you know the case so well, and you know that there was a lot of other detectives and assistant district attorneys involved, and you guys yourselves with your great work. I think the collaboration from where it started to where we're at now is tremendous, and you guys really got it out in the public, just like you have with all of your other projects. So wonderful, spreading the truth, and that's what needs to happen nowadays because of these false narratives going across not only the United States but the world. And if we didn't have your important voices out there and to put out what you do is a blessing. And I want to thank you guys so much for what you do.
Well, thank you so much. I just want to
Can I-
mention
I
to the
wanna-
audience
yes,
that Jim's face is pixelated.
Jim has not got a skin condition.
Yes. Jim has been pixelated because Jim is continuing to do the great work that we are
undercover work.
Undercover work. So
when he goes to buy OxyContin off drug dealers outside the Philadelphia area,
yes,
we don't want them. Because they all watch the Ann Phelim Scoop, and we don't watch. We want them to go, I just saw you on an episode. So.
Well, we want to start by going back, Jim, because a lot. It always amazes me the number of people that you meet that still don't know this story. So let's go right back to 2010. When did you first hear about Kermit Gosnell? How did that come about?
So we were doing a drug investigation. My partner, Rich Gramlich, was buying OxyContins undercover from a couple girls. And what we try to do is get to the source. And most of the times the source of these illegal prescriptions comes from a doctor. So we were trying to nail down the doctor's name. And in one of the undercover recordings with Rich Gramlich, he asked Kathy Taylor, who's your doctor? And she literally on a recording spells out the name Gosnell. And that's the first time during the course, I think it was 2009, we were making the OxyContin buys from Kathy Taylor and Tarina Johnson.
Yeah. And that led up eventually to a raid on the clinic at 3801 Lancaster in West Philadelphia. And that happened in February 2010. And I think it happened in the evening. Can you describe that evening, the lead up to that evening, and what happened when you eventually did get into the clinic?
Certainly. So after we get federal search warrants for the drug investigation, because the FBI became involved, and local state search warrants for specifically the death of Karnamaya Mongar and any evidence related to her, that was the initial search warrants for Gosnell's house, his office, records from the University of Pennsylvania, and his truck. We got to the location around his office. We knew that he was coming from Delaware. He was performing abortions in the Delaware office, and the FBI had pinpointed that he was working that night. We weren't sure whether he was going to go directly home or directly to the office, but he ended up going directly to the office, and we were ready. He parked his car. We approached him, and he had been on the phone with his wife, Pearl, and I explained to him that we had search warrants for his property, his house, and he didn't seem upset, or like a normal person would be. Hey, you got a search warrant for my house and my office. What's going on here? None of that. He's calmly, and you guys know as well how he communicates. Just very low key, and nothing really seems to, throw him off. So once we got him to go in the office with us, he asked if he could bring his clamshells in, which of course, it's so vivid in my mind how everything, happened after that. We just were looking at each other like, clamshells? We have a search warrant for your office here. You're in pretty deep stuff. You should be more concerned with what's going on as far as the search warrant, not feeding your turtles, which is eventually what he wanted to do. And that's one of the first things he did. He put his dinner down. He carried in his teriyaki salmon, put it down, put his bags down, put the clams away, and came back with 2 clams, and immediately walked up to the fish tanks where the turtles were, smashed them together, and dropped them in the tank. Every move that this guy made, you felt like you were in the Twilight Zone from our first encounter with him.
Okay, so we're going to play a little bit of the trailer now, actually, the trailer of the Gosnell movie. And you'll see Dean Cain
playing Jim Wood.
Playing Jim Wood. And, gross miscasting. Jim's much better looking. That's another reason we had to pixelate him.
That's right.
We didn't want Dean to feel insecure.
That's right.
Because Jim is so much better looking. So
let's watch that now.
Let's watch the trailer.
All right, listen up. We are looking for anything that looks like drugs or paraphernalia.
Philadelphia Police Department, we have a search warrant.
What is that smell? Man, you gotta see this. Is this normal?
I don't know. I've never been in an abortion clinic before. You are not going to believe what I saw last night.
How many?
So far, we found over 30 of them. Healthy woman goes into a clinic, comes out dead, and there's no police report?
Files have been moved recently.
Look at this.
You'll be the prosecutor who went after reproductive rights, and you'll be a racist to boot.
You've got a lot of folk who'd like to see abortion outlawed. And this is not going to be the case that gives them an excuse.
Prosecution has offered you a plea bargain, Dr. Gosnell.
Then I would have to admit I was guilty. I'm not guilty.
When you get to the courthouse, you are going to be swarmed by reporters.
You ready for this, counselor?
Where's everybody?
When was the last time your division inspected Dr. Gosnell's clinic?
We had instructions directly from Governor Ridge's office not to inspect.
Wouldn't testify in that case about anything. You doubt you'll find a doctor who will.
And you look at the facts, you will see what I see.
An overly zealous Catholic investigator.
Is that what you want to make this about?
There's nothing that man did that protects women or children, and you don't have to be a pro-life activist to see that.
Kermit Gosnell is perhaps the most prolific serial killer in American history.
You better win.
When you walked in, so you say like there was a whole gang of you guys who walked in that night of the raid. What was the first thing that struck you when you walked in there?
The smell, a horrible smell of death. I guess it was the chemicals and with the amount of patients that he was taking care of, supposedly taking care of, and the bodily fluids, it was just a smell of death.
I mean, you found 47 fetuses also wrapped in various containers, in fridges, in cupboards. I mean, when you say the smell of death, sometimes that's metaphorical, but actually in this case, there were 43 dead bodies, 47 dead bodies in the premises.
And there was remnants of procedures that he had done where they didn't clean up, and it was clearly on the floor. There was blood-stained floor, and who knows what other stains were there. It was just such a mill that I don't think they cleaned up anyway, but night after night after night, the night we went there was 8 or 9 women waiting for their abortions, and several of them had to be transported out to hospitals because of their condition, and they had already received medication, and some of the medications was the Demerol to make them sedated, or other sedatives they were given, so he could just continue with how he did his what he called abortions.
One of the weird things I think about that night as well was, you talk about the smell, but also there were cats walking around, right?
Yes, cat urine smell, litter boxes that were full. And as a matter of fact, I took a subsequent picture with one of the cats in the picture.
Feet in jars as well, yes?
Exactly, and that's one of the things I think you referenced in the movie, Dean Cain, and does a great job of looking at, and that's exactly what I did. When I first opened that cabinet and saw the plastic jar with the foot in several of the jars with the green cap, it was striking. However, I'd never been in an abortion facility. Common sense would tell you there's no need to do that. However, again, that was an industry I wasn't familiar with at all.
I mean, one of the things that I think, was really upset you that night, amongst all the other things that happened, was the fact that, the place was disgusting. It was really unsanitary. It was really unhygienic. There was this awful smell. There were cats. It was like every protocol that anybody would know about what a medical facility should be like was absolutely set aside when it came to this place. This was a hellhole. And amongst the people in the raid that you had with you, you had people from the DA's office, you had people from Philadelphia Police Department, you had people from the DEA and FBI, but you also had people from the health department, the Department of Health, who were there to protect any patients who might have been on the premises when you raided. And as you say, there were people there. There was one thing that happened that you and I think one of the FBI agents both thought that there should be no procedures should continue to happen because of the unsanitary situation. However, that's not exactly what happened. Can you tell us what happened?
As I said, they were transporting several other patients to other hospitals. However, there was one patient that was bleeding or something happened. And the two health care nurses that were with us were the ones that were supposed to be doing the routine checks at the locations. And I think it was one of those nurses that had talked to one of the group supervisors of the FBI, he was only acting, and myself and Jason Huff, the agent assigned to the case with me, we looked at him like, how can you allow him to do this? We potentially could arrest him tonight if we get enough evidence. And they allowed him to allow the nurses to let Gosnell continue with the procedure. And there was nothing we could do about it. We voiced our concern. I thought it was kind of contradictory to let him do that because, we're saying this guy's a killer and he's using dirty instruments, and there's a whole lot of, a woman had died, Kornemaya Mongar. So all those thoughts went through our minds is, why would we then allow this doctor to continue to practice? It was immediate suspect in my mind, and I think Jason's mind. But again, that wasn't our decision.
And I think it's amazing because, these are the same health department who go into restaurants and say, put down your knives and forks, stop eating. We found dust in the kitchen. We found an open jar of tomato ketchup that wasn't refrigerated properly. You know that. You know how the Department of Health normally operates. However, in this occasion, when the incredibly unsanitary conditions, that's the least of what was going on, they allowed him to continue. And I think that was really shocking.
And this is the same Department of Health that had numerous complaints about him. They should have actually given you their files for background, or I don't know how the procedure works, but going in with you was a conflict of interest because when it was obvious that there was problems there, they were on the hook also. They could actually have been potentially facing charges themselves, the Department of Health.
They knew that night because at least the one nurse did. She had been there before and she did nothing. And when I interacted with that particular nurse and said, I can't believe this is going on, and any person in their right mind seeing and smelling and looking at all the people, the patients in there and just the conditions. And she turned around and said, I'm just saying that because I'm a police officer. And I right back snapped at her, no, I'm saying it because I'm a human being. Any human being would have said that. I was so appalled at her, but I didn't know her reasoning at the time. And it's because, like you said, she had been there before. She knew what we were going to find. And she acted like, I guess if she acted surprised or upset as I was, then she would be acknowledging her guilt, which I guess she couldn't at that point, but she should have because it was appalling.
I just want to give the listeners and the viewers some background here to go back. So under Pennsylvania law, you're supposed to, the Department of Health was supposed to physically inspect abortion clinics every year. That's the law. That was the law. And the law never changed. But then Tom Ridge. A
Republican governor.
Republican candidate stood on a I'm sure Jim can't go into the politics, so we're going to tell the viewers and the listeners the politics. Stood on a pro-choice moderate governor, and the first thing he did when he got into power was say, we're suspending the visits to abortion clinics, the inspections of abortion clinics, without changing the law, by the way, just by executive order. So we saw even then executive orders can be interesting instruments.
And so what it really meant was that on that night that Jim and the rest of the crew raided that clinic, it was the first time the Department of Health had crossed the threshold of that 3801 Lancaster facility in 17 years. Yeah. And this is despite the fact that 2 women had died. Kornemaya Mongar, the Bhutanese refugee, had died in 2009. But prior to that, in 2000, Samika Shaw, a young African-American mother, had died. Neither of those deaths had inspired anyone from the Department of Health in Harrisburg to come and inspect the clinic.
And in addition, women were arriving at hospitals in the area.
Damaged,
but also quite obviously, Pennsylvania has a very liberal abortion law. 24 weeks is the cutoff. But women were arriving at hospitals
much later.
Abortions of 30 weeks, breaking the law. These were reported. There was doctors reported, but nothing was done. So,
but that brings up one of the issues that I want to ask Jim about. So the law in Pennsylvania was 24 weeks. And I mean, as Jim and the rest of the crew were going around, they were finding these bodies, of these 47 bodies of these children that were found on the premises. And some of them were quite big. And I think you went in, Jim, and they separated all the workers so that they could interview them and try and get as much information as possible. And Jim and another one of the detectives went and spoke to Gosnell. Tell us a little bit about that, and particularly about your question about the age of the bodies that were being found.
Sure. So our goal that night was to get a hold of Gosnell and question him as far as what happened to Karnamaya Mangar and what happened to, or why he prescribed so many Oxycontins. And that involved Jason Huff, the FBI agent, and Steve Doherty, the DEA diversion investigator. So the three of us were to get Gosnell, but like we said, there was that little interruption where he had to do the procedure. And of course he comes back with the bloody gloves and asked if he could eat his dinner with the bloody gloves, which he does right in front of us. And Jason, from then on, could not eat the teriyaki salmon anymore.
I don't know how anyone, by the way, could eat anything after that ever again.
So I just want to be clear. So the doctor came in after doing an abortion with bloody gloves, and there was a hole in the glove too. So his hand, and started eating his teriyaki salmon in front of you.
Without taking the gloves off.
In the movie, I just want to be clear. In the movie, we have him coming in, and he takes his gloves off. I think we did that.
One off. One off.
Yeah, we did that because we wouldn't. I think we thought no one would believe a doctor would come in and start eating his dinner with bloody gloves on. So we thought people will think we're just making this out to get. We actually downplayed the madness of the situation, and we did that a couple of times in the movie because we thought people will not believe.
And just to emphasize this again, Jason Huff gave evidence during the trial of Kermit Gosnell, and obviously speaking under oath, under pain of perjury, and all of that. He tells this story. He told that story in the court to, I think, an incredibly disgusted and appalled jury and the people who were in the. We'll talk about the court in a minute. But go on, tell the rest of that story.
So when we get past that, and it just seemed like forever to get him by himself to question him, and we were dying. We were surprised that he was going to talk to us. Mm-hmm. But like when you guys asked me, you can't shut him up, and it was kind of good that night. We got right to the point with the drug stuff. Jason and Steve were asking about certain patients, and we talked about the sponsors and the Smurfs. Like a sponsor would come in and recommend all these Smurfs, and Gosnell admitted that he did bring in patients we would identify as Smurfs, because the patients would pay an initial fee to get on Gosnell's books. And so Gosnell was making money that way for new patients. But then he would also prescribe each patient the Oxycontins, the Xanax, the cough medicine, cough syrup. And so one sponsor may be responsible for 10 or more Smurfs. And one prescription would be 60 pills of 80 milligram Oxycontin at the time, which is very powerful. And those pills were all hitting the streets. I mean, you're talking thousands and thousands of Oxycontins. So Gosnell acknowledged the fact that he knew this was going on. And I think in one of the subsequent phone calls with, Latasha Lewis, she records a call for us and talks about, he talks about how in these economic times, people need these scripts to survive. And I know exactly what he meant by that he knew these people were going to go out and sell these prescriptions to make money from them.
So each prescription was 60 on the street. How much is an 80 milligram tablet of Oxycontin worth back then? How much was that?
Well, in Philadelphia, it would be about $60 a pill if you sold it separately. So you're talking one prescription would be worth $3,600.
Wow.
And that's just one prescription. And these people were getting 10 prescriptions.
And how much was Gosnell getting per prescription?
$125, maybe $150 for the patient visit. And then the girls who worked the reception desk would get tipped by people like Tarina Johnson or Kathy Taylor. They'd give them 20, 30 bucks. And then Tarina Johnson would receive from Latasha Lewis, say, 10 individual prescriptions for 10 individual patients. Because those patients, the Smurfs, wouldn't have to come back to the doctor's office. They didn't need to, because Latasha Lewis Kathy Taylor or Tarina Johnson would come and pick all their scripts up. It was a known fact, which is crazy.
So you had the interview with Gosnell that night, and he kind of admitted to quite a bit of knowledge. You know, he was kind of acknowledging the fact that there was a drug problem, that he was involved in some kind of drug dealing situation. But then you also went on and asked him about the bodies that were being found all over the premises, and he volunteered, because I think you said to him, are these within the limit of the 24 weeks what's allowed in Pennsylvania? And what did he volunteer to you?
So about the death of Connor Maya, and again, we were receiving information from other detectives that were letting on to some of the things that he was doing. So I was able to ask him questions about that. And yes, one of the things, we knew that there was babies in the freezer. And one of the questions I said, well, if you had to guess, what percentage of the babies in the freezer would you say were past the 24 weeks? And he said 10 to 20% that would be past that term that he was supposed to do. Now, he tried to clarify by saying, well, in my opinion, it's not 24 weeks, it's 24 and a half, because of the gestational age he would guess. So he's given himself an extra week, to be err on the side of caution, so to speak. But I also asked him about Karnamaya Mangar and how she, who gave her the medication. And he lied. He said that he had given the medication when we knew that Linda had given Karnamaya Mangar the medication.
So just to explain, Karnamaya Mangar was she was a genuine refugee. There's so many non-genuine refugees in this country, but she'd spent 20 years in a refugee camp
in Nepal.
A Bhutanese refugee. She got here and
spent 4 months.
4 months later,
4 months
later she was dead. But because Gosnell was sitting at home whilst he was supposed to be attending to this woman, and he was basically telling people by phone to give her anesthesia. These women who had not probably graduated from high school. I think it's one of the worst.
It's kind of one of those awful things. And I don't know if I've said this to you before, Jim, and obviously we know Jim very well because of the movie, because of the book. And Jim came on set when we were shooting the movie down in Oklahoma. But one of the things that and it was a long time, and I'd been working on the book and I'd been working on the movie and all of that. And it was only one particular day, it just struck me that when Karnamaya Mangar was in Gosnell's clinic, and she went there a number of times because she was very, very pregnant. So she went there one day, and then a second day, and a third day. And on that last day of her life, the day she died, and she was being medicated by these two women that Jim described. You wouldn't let them mow your lawn. Neither of whom were nurses. Neither of whom had gone to high school. And I think at one point what must have happened was that Mrs. Mangar, who did not speak English, must have realized that she was going to die. She started to put up a fuss. She started to get agitated, very, very agitated. And my thought is she was trying to get the hell out of there, because she looked around, and this is a woman who had spent 20 years in a horrible refugee camp. She looked around this hellhole in Philadelphia and thought, I'm going to die here. God, I'm going to die here. And she tried to get away. And they phoned Gosnell, and he said, drug her up, med her up. Met her up, and they were asked on the stand what did that mean, and that meant to give her loads of Demerol to shut her up. And it's a terribly sad story.
Even a woman who'd spent 20 years in a refugee camp in Nepal, she was Bhutanese, even she realized this is not normal. The Department of Health went in and said, no, let him continue. This woman eventually realized this should not be happening. She knew something that the Department of Health didn't.
One of the few times that Gosnell did drop his guard and his face went ashen when I asked him, because we had found out that he was teaching these girls how to, used the ultrasound wand on the woman's belly to make the baby look like it fit within 24 weeks, when in fact it was probably 30 or 35 weeks. There was a certain way you could hold the wand. And based on the interviews from the other detectives, I asked Gosnell about that. I said, why would you need to adjust the ultrasound wand on the stomach? And he was stunned. He must have known at that point the others were giving him up. And his face just turned a different color, and he dropped his head. And that's when he talked about Tiller.
Oh, you talked about Tiller, the abortion doctor. I just want to say something. We have never seen that from Gosnell. We've met him, right? That change in demeanor, right? You know, that he's an amazing person. And he's so smooth and relaxed. Now, we got him in a few lies sometimes, and he would think, but we never got him like you did, you know, in the sense, you know, we caught him lying a few times, and he would sort of go, but I would love to have seen that.
There was a moment where he said, "Oh, you know about that?"
Yes.
I remember we asked him a question and he said, "Oh, you know about that." But I want to, because there's so much to say. And by the way, this is a really good segue for me to say, for those of you who don't know the story, want to know more about the story, there is a movie that we made, but there's also a book which is available as an audio book. It's also available on Amazon as a book that you read, and it's on digital, what's they call that, Kindle as well.
It's a New York Times bestseller book.
And it's a New York Times bestseller. And I want to just mention, like, just a couple of other things. So you know, there was a very long grand jury process that went on over a year. A really amazing process. There's an incredible number of stories to be told about that. But I want to bring it past that to the day that Gosnell eventually gets arrested. And that was January the 19th, 2011. And Jim was there, and Jim actually did put the cuffs on him. What was that like, Jim?
It was outstanding. I finally felt like we had reached our goal. And the goal was to arrest him and arrest everybody else that was involved. The circumstances of the arrest were kind of strange, but it felt good to me. And I go around presenting this case to law enforcement agencies. One of my own, I'm the chaplain of the Pennsylvania Narcotics Officers Association. So of course, that was the first place I presented the case. And as I go around making these presentations, I am surprised that not a lot of people know about it still. And even in private places like schools will have me, and I'll come in, and of course I change some of the subject matter is very difficult to take in, so I adjust with my presentations. But that being said, it was really nice to be able to be the one to get the arrest warrants, because most of the times as a Philly detective, the only one arresting people for homicide are homicide detectives. And I'm a narcotics detective assigned to the District Attorney's Office of Philadelphia. And there was so much back and forth and so many things that, you know, you guys probably didn't even realize the tug of war between the narcotics unit within the DA's office and the homicide unit, and then come to fruition when we got the arrest warrants and we arrested Gosnell. It felt awesome. But then I was instructed to go down to the homicide unit at 8th and Race and ask for help from the other homicide detectives. And I didn't really get a great welcome there, because I think they felt like it should have been their job to do that. And who am I? And I had a lot of friends down there. I actually spoke to Chief Ramsey, who was very upset because no one told him that we were going out to make these raids. It was so quiet. And the reason for that is because there was a leak to the news media. Someone, and we believe it came from the homicide unit, that they were calling the news every time there would be a search warrant done. And so the DA's office, and again, thankfully, I was the one that they chose to write up the complaints for the arrests. And it came back, and I was able to stay in the case to the end this time, because in the very beginning, I was pulled off the case.
Just to explain it to people, you know, you were a narcotics officer.
Yes.
You discovered the murders, you discovered the killings, and you know,
it's not. Yeah,
it's not your, you know, and you know you see in the movies, it's a turf war, and you know, jurisdictional issues, and you're too close, and all this. You know, I guess you were getting all those cliches, and
we watch this stuff in Criminal Minds and FBI and all of these things.
And
so it's actually that's actually what happened. There was a kind of a turf war.
The day after the initial search warrants, and we had talked about reading people their Miranda warnings beforehand, and it was discussed, do we or do we not? And the FBI was, we don't have to because they're not under arrest. So that was kind of what the Philly DA's office agreed to too. But the next morning, we were at the clinic till late into the morning, and 8 o'clock the next morning, I was on our top floor where all the top DAs were, and getting questions fired at me. Why didn't we do this? Why did we do that? And, you know, I was able to answer the questions, but I felt like I was kind of being attacked, you know, Monday morning quarterback, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And one of the things where after we had got the interviews, now we had a lot more evidence of wrongdoing. Now we could go back and get the babies in the freezer as evidence. Now we could go back and get additional evidence and pictures, because we knew through the statements that were taken that Gosnell had done all these other things, and there was plenty of. So we decided to get, or should I say, the DA's office decided to do a consent search to get the additional evidence rather than additional search warrants. But again, as you put in the book, and the book is so great and the movie's so great, it just explains all that very well, especially when it got to the grand jury, because that's how the story was unfolded from start to finish, from years of neglect by the Philadelphia Health Department, the Pennsylvania Department of Health, you know, and the citizens and the grand jurors were awesome. I mean, that's what gives you hope. That's what's giving me hope right now in this crisis, not only with the COVID crisis, but with the rioting that's going on. The people in these communities, they love the police. I know that. I work there. I see that. The people of the United States of America are going to rebound from the COVID, and they're going to rebound from these riots, and we're going to be stronger for it. And the police departments are going to be stronger because the people in the community need us and they love us.
But the media weren't so keen to cover this trial, isn't that right? You were in the courtroom. Was there much media attention?
Not at all until the very end. And I think it's almost like everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon once they start seeing the notoriety of the case, and they knew, they kind of, I think, saw the writing on the wall. So like, we better get our acts together. But you're right.
I was in the court early on, and I think I saw Jim there. I didn't know Jim at the time. I was in the court early on, and I remember walking in, and there was, you know, the jury was to the right. Gosnell was sitting a few yards in front of me, and there was a witness giving the most horrific evidence I've ever heard. And I've been a journalist, a crime journalist for 25 years, covering some really horrific things. And then the pictures of the babies were blown up on the side wall, if I remember. And like, these were horrific pictures. But I mean, the most shocking thing of all was behind me was the empty press benches, right? This was a crime story extraordinaire. This was a crime story about a serial killer. This was a crime story that involved one of the most hot button topics in America, called abortion. This is about a doctor, middle class.
It's about children.
It's about children. This is about, he was African American. He treated white women better than the black patients.
It was about a refugee who had died.
It was about a refugee. I mean, and
it was about Oxycontin.
It was about the opioid crisis, and most of, you know, also important, it was in a major metropolitan area. It was also close to New York. You can understand that if it was in Alabama or somewhere where it's actually difficult sometimes for mainstream reporters to get to and expensive, they could have driven there.
No problem.
So it was not covered, and it was only when a social media campaign shamed them into it that they turned up. And they did turn up in the end, as you say. But
in the end,
they were shamed into it. And then once the verdict, and we'll come on to that, came out, they fled to the hills.
The day of the verdict, were you in court, Jim?
I was, yes.
Tell us what that was like. Were you nervous? Did you think, what did you think was going to happen?
I was cautiously optimistic, but very nervous, because anytime you take a jury trial, you just don't know what's going to happen. I was optimistic because of how the grand jurors reacted. And they wanted, and this is the grand jury, they wanted the women who had these abortions, late term abortions, arrested. They wanted some of the healthcare nurses and the supposed investigators, they wanted them arrested and charged because they neglected to do their duty. So given the fact that the grand jurors were so upset and understood, gave me a positive attitude towards this jury, especially when they brought in the instruments and the gurneys, and the smell was actually there. I think that helped out a lot to get the jurors to understand how serious this was, and listening to the testimony.
Yeah.
I once I heard the first guilty of Baby Boy A, I mean, it was outstanding, and that was all we needed. Although I wish, they would have found the rest, but Baby Boy A, the life sentence, I knew he was going to get. And then, of course, the 3 additional
charges.
And he was convicted of several charges. He was charged with multiple counts of different abortion-related crimes and other crimes.
As well as 3 life sentences. So he got 3 life sentences. So he won't be coming out of Huntington prison anytime soon. And as many people know, Phelim and I went to the prison. We interviewed him. And I tell the story very often, Jim, that it was very chilling because, as you say, he has this bizarre demeanor. Like, you go into this really sinister, environment where Phelim and I interviewed him. It was very intimidating. And he arrives and he has the demeanor of someone who has just played 18 holes of golf. And he's very jolly and he's very tall, well-spoken, has this very dulcet way of speaking, very soft tones.
Avuncular.
Avuncular. And then we leave we were there for about 3 hours. We left the prison quite shook up, by the way, by things that he said. I mean, very disturbing stuff. It's all in the book. And we'll talk about this more another day because I think there's so much information here. But we get in the car and we drove directly to Philadelphia to meet Jim for a meal. I remember it distinctly. We walk into this nice restaurant to meet Jim, and I said, "We've just come from Huntington Prison. We've just met Kermit Gosnell," and you said famously, "You've just met the devil."
I'll never forget it. And I felt bad for you guys, and I think, confronting him, knowing what he had done, and I think it had to be a shock for both of you. Knowing what this guy did, and then talking, like you said, the way he does, in just such a low tone, like he didn't do anything, like he just got in from playing 18 holes of golf. You're right. But in your mind, you probably had to decompress.
But one of the things with Kermit Gosnell that Jim knows very well is he has an obsession with his feet. And so I know when he was initially arrested, and obviously you're allowed to listen to his phone calls when he's phoning out, as long as he's not phoning to his solicitor, but he would talk about his feet all the time. He was always saying things like with these shoes or whatever. So when we get, and I knew about the feet, and obviously then there's obviously a very, very disturbing aspect of that, where he severed the feet of babies that he had murdered and kept them in jars that Jim unfortunately found. And also, while Phelim and I were sitting in the prison with him, he pointed out his feet and talked about his shoes and how tight his shoes were.
Yeah, and how difficult it was to get shoes to fit him. And then at one stage he does this. He puts his hand up in my face like this. I'm going,
he put his hand up, and I thought it was almost like that thing of, what is that thing from Star Wars, from Star Trek? I thought he was doing that. What is it?
No, but he showed me how big his hands were. Therefore, he had these big feet. He was just obsessed with feet, And
but he then drew for me at least, he drew attention to his hands. And I kept thinking, and he insisted on shaking our hands over and over again. And I kept thinking what those hands had done in a lifetime.
And then he kept putting his hands on your knee.
And then he kept putting his hands on my knee all the time, and then saying, every time he put his hands on my knee, saying, I'm sorry, but doing it again. And I think, and we talked about that with you, Jim, that he's very controlling. He knows exactly how to control people, how to manipulate people.
How to rattle them.
And how to rattle them. So after about 3 hours, he started asking some questions that I wasn't happy to listen to. And I thought, you know what? We've heard enough at this point. And I thought, you know what? You're not going to get to do this. There's a lot more to talk about here, but we want to just sort of segue into, let's just talk a little bit more generally about how have things been in Philadelphia then, with the riots, with everything that's been going on. We've seen Philadelphia in the news. Has it been very badly damaged?
It has. And I think because of the Democratic leadership, and I don't like getting political, But I think you see in every state and city that's run by these governors and these mayors, they're not taking charge like they should. And I don't mean, using tear gas and what, but if you have to, you have to. Don't apologize. Our police commissioner just apologized for using tear gas on rioters. They're not protesters. When you get out of hand and you're potentially going to harm the public, it becomes dangerous. And those tactics have to be used. I believe her hiring was just to appease a certain part of the community. And I feel bad for her. I really do, because she came from Portland, Oregon, I believe, and where I think the amount of officers on their force are about 500. Philly, you have about 6,000 officers. And someone had said to me early on, the guy that should have gotten the job in this, it was Sullivan, who very tactically sound, and probably, I believe, would have done a better job responding to these rioters. Because what I saw on TV, where they literally, a guy got in one of the police cars and set it forward in motion like a rocket, and it smashed into other cars, that could have killed people. And who would they have blamed for that? They would have blamed the police for allowing their cars to be taken over and then firebombed. And thank God they did catch one of the firebombers, which is a total anarchist. It's this white woman who's throwing a Molotov cocktail, and they make it look bad for the blacks in the city. I've worked in those communities, and I know, that's why I said this before, they love the police. They love being the protection. My God, we're surpassing last year's homicide rate already in the city. And the Mayor Kenny and Governor Wolf and Krasner, this DA, is ridiculous. He should have stayed on the side of defending people, because that's his passion. You can't be the district attorney of Philadelphia and have when I worked in the district attorney's office in Philadelphia, there's that blind justice. She's blindfolded for a reason. And Krasner, how can you do that job if he's not? He took the blindfold off, and he's all for the defense. And everybody needs a lawyer every now. I'm not saying, it's great to have the public defenders, and they're passionate, and they should be. That's their job. But when it comes to running a city and allowing this anarchy to take place, it's only going to get worse, and people are only going to get hurt by it. And again, the innocent people, the people that are stuck in these communities, and these police officers, I think, sorry to go off on a tangent, but what you're talking about is the feelings of the police officers. They're hurt. Fortunately for my one brother, John, he's on his way out. He's going to be retiring next month. My brother Kevin's stuck for at least another year. And he loves his job. And I think most police officers love their job. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So we're not doing it for the money, that's for sure. Yeah. It's interesting work. I would do it all over again, even with all the scrutiny, because that was my passion. That's what I liked doing. Yeah. And you feel protected by the powers to be. I believe in God. And I know that's an important, the most important thing in my life. And I think you feel the shield protecting you when you go into these dangerous situations. Yeah. And again, I think it's going to swing back to where it's going to get better. We just have to get through this tough time.
So you said you believe in God, and that's important. Just talk a bit more about that. How do you think that has affected your work?
I was born a Catholic, baptized. I was one of 12 children to Sally and James Wood. And I saw the struggles that they had through raising us. I was the second oldest of the 12. My older sister, Sally, she died of breast cancer, but she became a lawyer and had 5 children of her own. My father got MS, went mostly blind. And I saw my mother pick up the ball and run with it, get a job with healthcare. And that's the other thing. One of the things that bothers me about these narratives that these news organizations are spreading, the false narratives, that people don't have a chance. And it's really a detriment to the Black community. And I saw one of the civil rights attorneys on Fox News did an excellent job. I can't remember his name, older Black man. And his whole life, he was involved in civil rights. And he said, you know, when you do this and you make excuses, then you're making it worse for people, like they don't have a chance. People in this country, he got to where he was because he had opportunity, and we all do. And so in my life, growing up Catholic, and I felt filled with what I believe is the most important thing in my life and others' lives, is the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit, that's our spirit within our body. And you feel, you know, sometimes you feel so strong and you can do anything with the power of the Holy Spirit. And then other times, you, just like anybody, you get depressed when you see all the negativity going on in the world. But you know you're going to bounce back. You know, I mean, that's the power of the Holy Spirit, is you're always going to have that rebound to become stronger and better, and things will go good in your life if you have God in your life. That's just the way I've lived my life, and it's true. I have 4 grandchildren now, 5 children, and thank God so far everybody's doing okay. But you know, I know there's going to be good times and bad times in my future, and I need God. I need His strength and power to go on in this, especially during these times.
Amen to that, Jim. And we're so grateful that you're there. We have 2 additional questions that we ask all our guests before we wrap up. And the first one is, in your household, are you famous for cooking anything, Jim? Have you got a go-to recipe that you'd like to share with our listeners?
I don't know if it's actually a recipe, but I do cook a lot. I do a lot of breakfast in the morning. I could do good eggs, omelet, bacon, sausage. And I learned that from my mother. To this day, with all those kids, and they still go over to mom's house on Sunday morning to get their bacon, egg, and cheese and everything else. But I like cooking hot peppers, the long hots, and I cut up shallots and I add fresh chopped garlic, and I simmer it for a long time. Angela gets mad at me sometimes, and because some people cook it too fast. If you cook it too fast, you'll burn the peppers. But I simmer it in olive oil for a long time, sometimes maybe an hour. And by the time it's done, it's all nice and soft. And you could use them in omelets, or you could put them on pasta. And it just has a real nice taste, and it's a very good smell too.
Which kind of chilies do you use? Are these jalapenos? Which ones are they?
They're not jalapenos. They're called long hots. They're the green long hots, and they are pretty long. Just that I literally, you know, some people cook them with the whole pepper in the top. I cut the top off, and then I slice them down the middle, and I leave the seeds in, because you never know what kind of pepper you're gonna get. Sometimes you're gonna get them and they're mad, and then other times they're mild. But it doesn't matter because the olive oil and the seasonings, the shallots and the garlic really gives it a good flavor.
Oh, great. Okay. And then the second question we always ask people, have they a piece of art that's really important to them, like a movie, like a play, like a poem, a piece of music, anything that you'd like to share that's important to you?
So a couple things. Music is, I would say, Gordon Lightfoot. I don't know if you guys like Gordon, but I would drive down to Wildwood with the kids when they were little. And that's when they had cassette tapes. So we listened to Gord Gold 1 and Gord's Gold 2. Because he's had several hits, The Wreck of the Emmett Fitzgerald, and some other pretty big hits. But listening to the stories he tells in his songs is really interesting. And my kids to this day, we've seen him several times in concert. Now he's getting up there in age, but we still enjoy the music. So I would say Gordon Lightfoot is my favorite vocalist. And then movies. I like the Untouchables with Kevin Costner and Sean Connery.
I know this story. Tell the story, Jim. I love this.
So, and it's because it simplifies things to me as far as common sense, and it pertains to everything, I think. You know, they're walking on the bridge, Kevin Costner and Sean Connery, and Sean Connery's the older beat cop. And Kevin Costner's this agent, sort of like an FBI agent, or he's a Treasury agent back at the time when the alcohol was prohibited. And Kevin Costner had just done a raid and he didn't fare so well. So he's upset, and he sees a note from his wife, and it says, good luck or whatever. And he throws it into the river. And Sean Connery just happens to be walking by at the time. And he says, what do you think you're doing? And they become engaged. And Costner's like, don't you have anything better to do? And Connery's like, yeah, but I'm not doing them now. So, and then Connery hits his vest and he sees that he's got a gun. And right away, Kevin Costner says, I'm a Treasury agent. And Sean Connery turns his back on him and starts to walk away. And Kevin Costner can't believe it. He goes, you just saw that I had a gun and you turn your back on me. He's like, you said you're a Treasury agent. Who would claim to be that was not? And I love that, because it just explains right away. You're right. Like, who would say what, if you say you're a cop, well, let me see your badge. But he says he's a Treasury agent. So right away, it shows the common sense. And I think Brian De Palma did that film, and it showed that he must have done his homework, because that's exactly why federal agencies choose local cops to be on their task forces to this day, because they want someone with common sense who's going to think quick and be street smart. And that sort of lays the foundation of that movie, and why Kevin Costner picked Sean Connery to be his go-to guy, and he did.
I love that story. And by the way, the screenplay for The Untouchables was written by David Mamet, and I think you'd like David Mamet a lot, actually. He's very interesting. He was very liberal, became conservative, very interesting guy. But I just love that. I love that story that you tell, and we have that story in the book, because you said that it was one of the problems, that so many people don't have common sense, and you really need common sense as a cop. And I think it's something that we know from cops. We know they really have this kind of sense of, they can make some judgments because of common sense, But we've kind of come to the end of today's show, and actually this is longer than normal, but we really loved having you on, Jim.
And I feel that we have only touched
I think we've only touched on the surface. I think we may have to just go back again and do more here, because this is a huge story. But I think one of the things that I think is a joy and a miracle to us was that we ever got to meet you. The world was very lucky that you were the kind of cop you were, that when you discovered something wasn't right, more than the narcotics story with Gosnell, that there was something untoward, that a woman called Carnamaya Munger had died, and you would not stop until you found out and got justice for her, and that you were her champion, remains an inspiration to us. And at this particular time in American history, when cops are getting such a bad time, we wanted to highlight you today. We wanted to highlight you this week, in this special week of July 4th, how brilliant this country is, how wonderful this country is, and the people like you is what makes it wonderful. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I have enjoyed every time we get together. The movie was outstanding. I can't believe time has gone by so fast, but we'll keep this in the forefront, because it's important. You guys are champions of this cause and many other causes for cops. And I let them know all the time, with the Ferguson, the play. I mean, you guys called that, and we have to set this narrative straight.
Correct.
And the media has to get on board with us. I mean, I don't know what's going to take. I never paid attention to politics or really the media until, reason and propaganda. I learned it in school years ago what it was. And this is strictly propaganda against our country. And we have to stand up.
So, Jim, are your colleagues, I suppose, are treating you with a lot more respect since you've been in the movie?
I never pass a day where somebody says something to me. Hey, Woody, he's a movie star, and it's funny, and we've had a lot of fun with it. It never gets old.
Yeah.
All right,
okay.
We're gonna go.
Well,
all right, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Well, that was a great interview with Jim. We just love Jim, and I think it's all. I love that story he tells. By the way, the Sean Connery one about the Untouchables. I hope David Mamet gets to see this actually and hear about how much that meant to Jim Wood. He quotes that story all the time about common sense. But we are so proud to have Jim as a friend, and he's a lifelong friend of ours now. He's stuck with us now, unfortunately. God help him.
And I think I think Philadelphia and those areas is very lucky to have him as a cop. I mean, he could have retired years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing about these guys. He could have retired years ago on probably a 50, 60, probably 70% pension. So he's really working for 30 or 40 cents in the dollar. I know someone, our friend who's a cop, he's one of the old school. He's entitled to a pension of 70% of his salary.
But he keeps working.
He keeps working, so he's working.
But exactly like Jim said, people, because they love the job, they want to do good. And, if it wasn't, as we said, and as you'll hear now, Gosnell wouldn't be in prison at all if it wasn't for Jim.
Yes.
Now
we're going
to go outside.
To the most important part of the show.
We're going to go outside and have a gin and tonic in the sunshine.
Yes.
So see you outside.
We feel this is our little addition to the holiday, hopefully the holiday atmosphere that you're having. I know many places are not having much. We're trying to make it as festive as possible, as holiday as possible, because
we do know people are suffering and people are having a hard time, and if this can cheer you up in any way at all, come outside and let's have a gin and tonic.
Yes.
Hi everyone, so we're outside now. Hi Phil.
And that is a tree being trimmed.
We're living in an area where there's a lot of work going on, so don't worry about the extraneous noise. So we are going to make my gin and tonic. And
what am I doing now?
And you're going to squeeze limes. So I want Phelim to squeeze 2 limes because I'm not drinking alone. So squeeze those limes.
So how do I do that? I cut them like this.
Correct. And no, I want you to use this.
Yes.
And while you're doing that, I want to tell people about the tonic water.
First of all, I want to ask somebody.
What would you like to ask?
Yvonne.
Oh no.
Which of these is bigger, this or the table?
The table.
No, you'd be wrong, because this is the greater.
Yeah, okay. That's an awfully sad. That's such a sad story. All right, thank you. Put that away. Please put that away. So I'm not to show off or anything, but I seem to have accumulated a lot of different gins here. And for today, we're certainly going to be using this Gordon's gin, which is my favorite. The Bombay Sapphire that gets enormous. People love the Bombay Sapphire.
Can I just point out we've got a very diverse group of gins: Irish gin, Indian gin, English gin.
And why are people making gin nowadays in Ireland, Phelim?
Well, everyone, because it is ready in 3 months. It only takes 3 months to distill, as opposed to whiskey, which takes 3 years minimum.
Minimum. And you notice, by the way, one of those bottles, Bombay Sapphire, I think is overrated. The other bottle that's there is the Botanicals. And I'm going to put this in the notes. Actually, let's remember to do that, Phelim. We're going to put it in the notes on the show, on the YouTube channel. There is an article from the Wall Street Journal, a review of that Botanicals. That's like one of the most delightful pieces of writing I've ever read. It just made me happy to be alive, which I think is important for people nowadays. Phelim, are you having difficulties here?
I am having difficulties.
Right. Are you? Because we're sitting very close together. So this is the gin we're going to use. Funny enough, I looked up a few different recipes because I've told this before, these are very useful. This one I think has about 1.5 ounces in it, and this one has 1 ounce, exactly 1 ounce, and that's a half. And for this drink, for each person, bizarrely, seems like a lot, we're going to have 3 ounces of alcohol. Okay, yes. Okay, that's very good, Phelim. Keep on.
Don't forget, many people are listening to this on the podcast. They will not see the picture, so just forget.
Yeah, but they're going to hear all the bad noise. 1, 2,
ooh, no, I can smell it from here.
3, 4. I should have done this earlier. 4, 5, 6, and luckily we have Yvonne here to help me. Wow! No, that's 2 people. That's 2 people apparently.
6 mils of gin.
It's true. No, it's 6 ounces. It's 3 ounces per person. But it does 3 ounces. Sorry, we agree. It does seem like a lot, by the way. And I think you could squeeze more.
I know we're Irish, but we have to live up to every.
And then every cliche. Then we're going to put in sliced.
I got this. I think there's a cornucopia, but rather than putting your hands on it.
Well, no, too late. But you can put that in there. So that's the lime. We threw in some lime in there. We've got the gin in there. What else is going to go in there, Phelim? Oh yeah, the lime juice is going to go in there. The lime juice is going to go in there.
Freshly squeezed juice of 4 limes.
It's very helpful.
4 limes?
Let's do 4 limes, and you could maybe do. What do you think, Yvonne? Should we do more than 4 limes? They're quite small, those limes.
Yeah,
let's do 2 more. Let's do 2 more limes because we really like our lime juice.
Oh, luckily we have a lot of limes. Where did you get those limes?
You get those limes in Costco at a very good price, and it really breaks your heart if you buy them anywhere else because they're so expensive. This gets me on to the important issue that I really wanted to bring everyone's attention to today. Really important is tonic water.
So my mother and father really liked Gin and Tonic. And they were very religious about Schweppes, only Schweppes, not Canada Dry. And not this Schweppes, but this Schweppes. And I'm not saying that because of being puritanical and trying to lose weight, because clearly we're not trying to do that, but because of the taste. So here's an interesting thing, and I really do feel like I'm doing a public service here. You know us, Phelim. Thank you. The public services we like to do.
Yes.
Here is Fever Tree, right? Here's Fever Tree. Actually, I'm not going to start with Fever Tree. Let me start with this one. This is Schweppes tonic water, the real deal, the real stuff. How much sugar do we think is in each serving? Phelim, do you think there's 10 grams of sugar?
I would think there's 8 grams of sugar in each serving.
There are 33 grams of sugar in each serving. That's what I call...
As I like my sugar, but I think that's a lot of sugar.
It's incredible, actually. It's almost hard to believe. So basically, 65% of the calories are from sugar. Basically, it's got 130 calories, and it's not nice. I don't like it.
Almost
I don't
enough
like
to make
it.
me start drinking alcohol.
And then we have this one, Premium
That's
Tonic
sugar?
Water, Fever Tree. How much sugar does it have? It's 19.2 grams, 38% of this
Per
is sugar. Per meter, exactly.
So Americans pronounce meter or measure?
Okay, Phelim, are we ready with that? I think this is good now. I'm good with that.
Okay.
And now I need ice. I'm going to throw some ice in here.
My work here is done.
I'm throwing that ice in. And my hands were washed earlier because obviously we've got a pandemic going on.
These are not the droids you're looking for.
And I'm putting this in here. I have this real fear that because I'm not really focusing that I'm going to end up doing the wrong thing.
Oh, this musher. What was it?
Oh, the musher. Oh, yeah, the musher.
What's that for?
The musher is to mush down. Okay, we definitely did that in the wrong order. This is to mush down the lime.
Oh, here we go.
No, I got it. Well, go ahead. Go ahead. You can put that in, actually. Thank you, sweetie. Okay, I'm putting that in there. Right? Now, mush, mush, mush.
So this is a corn in the
And
cob.
I bought the musher.
I just want to say, this is a corn in the cob. I couldn't find anything to pick up the lime.
By the way,
It was
Phelim,
delicate.
Phelim, it's not called a musher. It's actually called a... Oh, I know what it's called. It's called a muddler.
Muddler.
It's a muddler. So we muddled a bit there, right? In the wrong order. But
as long as it's not a muller. See,
well,
but politics there.
See, Phelim is the CFO, Chief Fun Officer. Okay, I'm closing this down. Do you remember the last day we didn't close it down properly? I'm going to shake this.
Love Tropicana, it's for me.
Well, that's actually worked. Now, the problem is to get it out of here. Okay, I'm shaking that up. Now, we still haven't done tonic water because I was going to do that last. All right, I'm coming with a glass now. The other thing that's a really good idea
is that a proper gin and tonic glass?
No, we're very short of glasses here. Use these huge pieces of ice. The great thing about the huge piece of ice is that it doesn't melt so fast.
My God,
so the alcohol doesn't get washed down. It doesn't get diluted.
My God, that's an enormous piece of ice.
I know, but I love those big things. So it's just the two of us here. So here we go. We're going to take this off here, and I'm going to pour, right? I'm going to pour this in, and then we're going to put in the tonic water. Okay, let me try this. Like that, and like that. Oh, you see, there we go. And I'm going to put all of this in. Hang on now. Wait to see. Oh, Phelim, you know what you're going to do now? You're going to garnish that with some... Can I just tell you, you may have noticed, by the way, we didn't rehearse this. We may rehearse it next time. But here we go. Hang on now. So all that's going in there. Put in a little garnish, Phelim. Put in a little garnish. All these little fellas here.
No, stop. Take your hands off.
All right.
I've got the little...
Okay, and now we're going to use this. We're going to use the diet tonic water because it's obviously the nicest one. Yummy, 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 yummy. Okay. Oh, watch. And then you open it really slowly so it doesn't explode. Yeah. And so we're basically recommending the diet Schweppes. Really hard to find, by the way. Really hard to find. But yummy, yummy, yummy. I probably should have a bigger glass, Phelim.
I think you should.
You know that?
No.
Do I have a bigger glass? You know what we're going to do with this for right now? And I'm going to hand it over to our chief taster. And I'm going to give it a taste. Oh, but also I think I'm going to do this. Now, for all you experts out there, I know what's going to happen. We're going to get a whole load of mail from people saying it's not the way you meant to do it at all. But this is our first little effort. And let's see, there's lovely bubbles there. There's lovely bubbles. Hand that over.
What is this, a long
Hand
spoon?
Hand that over. That's a long... That came with the new... Because basically, since the pandemic started, people have started to rediscover cocktail hour. So we're going to try this. And let me just see. Oh, God, that's great. Can I just say, happy Independence Day. We love this country. Really glad to be here. Really glad to have you along as our lovely friends and lovely, lovely supporters. We love you. And have a wonderful weekend. And we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Thank
Bye.
you for all you do. Bye.